You are watching Noble Xenon News. First up tonight on the news, top intelligence reveals that China may be using the sea to hide its submarines. Meanwhile, Northfield plans to plan a strategic plan. These plans have not yet been revealed, but experts say these plans should be well planned. Meanwhile, Lane County to pay $250,000 to advertise lack of funds. And now we go to science. Breathing oxygen has been linked to staying alive. Quite the shocking discovery. Meanwhile, statistics show that teen pregnancy drops off significantly after age 25. Scientists are still figuring out the cause. Meanwhile, in the job market, cows lose their jobs as milk prices drop. Meanwhile, federal agents raid gun shop and find weapons. Agents are still baffled at how they got there. Meanwhile, the city is unsure of why the sewer smells. Some say it's poop, but you can never be too sure. This next story is so exclusive, it's exclusive to all newspapers. Princess Diana was still alive hours before she died. A series of previously unseen CCTV images have revealed that Diana was alive and well before she was tragically killed in Paris, a lot more than 10 years ago. Do you think Diana is dead, or have you seen her in Morocco? Call now and send your wildest theories. Now think of a headline. Any headline. Actually, hold on, it has to be a 56-point bold headline. This next article may cause a meltdown among readers, as a nuclear explosion would be a disaster. Meanwhile, in more economic news, the World Bank says the poor need more money. Rich nations are called to task for crisis. The smartest minds in all of the planet came together to come to that conclusion. Meanwhile, police may have found a supervillain as a man was arrested for everything. Several court dates have been set between now and 2153. Meanwhile, in order to make the plans of plans more well planned, a committee has appointed a committee to appoint committee. Meanwhile, some good news out of the state of Mississippi. Their literacy program shows improvement. Meanwhile, another interesting discovery, rooms with broken air conditioners are hot. While that's occurring, the state population is set to double by 2040. After years of investigation, a culprit, or rather several culprits, have been found. Babies are to blame. Meanwhile, hospitals may be entering uncharted territory with this next move. They're resorting to hiring doctors. Physician shortage prompting move, administrators say. I'll have to confirm with the committee of committees, though. Meanwhile, in law, Alton attorney accidentally sues himself. More at 11. Meanwhile, a woman has been missing since she got lost. Meanwhile, at the Gorman School, students cook and serve grandparents. Meanwhile, a woman in a sumo wrestler suit assaulted her ex-girlfriend in a gay pub after she waved at a man dressed as a Snickers bar. Perhaps the saying "you're not you when you're hungry" is truer than we thought. Meanwhile, a prisoner serving a 2,000-year sentence could face more time. Meanwhile, another discovery that could change science forever: starvation can lead to health hazards. Meanwhile, in more morbid news, a man was found dead in a graveyard. Meanwhile, in Australia, an army vehicle disappears. An Australian army vehicle worth $74,000 has gone missing after being painted with camouflage. Meanwhile, a convicted murderer has sued the detective who arrested him, saying the investigator ruined his reputation. Meanwhile, in Germany, ex-minister breaks his silence and says nothing. Meanwhile, psychics predict the world didn't end yesterday. It's unknown if the world will end today, though. Two seers also envision Treasure Coast boom. Meanwhile, in health, quintuplets were born 15 months early. Meanwhile, if you've noticed more people moving into Oregon recently, the newest residents are from elsewhere. More people have been moving into Oregon than moved out. Some say there have been far too many shocking discoveries, but I say there haven't been enough. This time around, we have found out that rain is the biggest factor in flooding. Meanwhile, a brand new sick policy requires 2-day notice. I've already told my boss I'll be sick next Monday. Meanwhile, you won't won't believe the reason for more bear sightings. More bears. Meanwhile, in more news, the Committee of Committees of Committees has finally called an election. Voters to vote on whether to vote. Lake City voters may no longer elect the city clerk and city treasurer, but only if they vote to do so. Unfortunately, the city council wasn't as decisive, as they run out of time to discuss shorter meetings. Another marathon city council meeting forced councilors to put off agenda item number 6, a proposal to limit the length of meetings. Meanwhile, funeral homes bring cheer to senior citizens. However, the children aren't left out because they have been invited to eat pizza with poo. Isn't that lovely? Meanwhile, at 3:56 p.m. this afternoon, police dispatch responded to a report of a Swanson chicken pot pie running east on Clay Street. It is unknown whether the pot pie was caught. Meanwhile, a deputy responded to a report of a vehicle stopping at mailboxes. It was the mailman. Meanwhile, fish on drugs are more likely to drop out of schools, study says. This is a reminder to all the fish out there to stay in schools. Meanwhile, yet another discovery was made as caskets were found as workers demolish a mausoleum. Meanwhile, a man with 8 DUIs blames his drinking problem. Meanwhile, signs of the apocalypse may be incoming, as the world's only reliable newspaper reports that a computer virus has spread to humans. Meanwhile, an evil genius is actively recruiting minions to sacrifice their lives in a world domination attempt. Prospective minions must be prepared to work 24/7 for fascist psychopath for no pay. However, the evil genius notes that a messy death is inevitable, but costumes and laser death rays will be provided. Weirdos need not apply. Meanwhile, in another death investigation, police find man dead in cemetery. Meanwhile, officials say arsenic in our city's water is nothing to worry about, and if you notice a strange odor in the water, stinky water is okay to drink. Austin water utility officials said Wednesday that residents might notice an unusual taste and odor in their tap for the next few weeks, but it is safe to drink. Nothing to worry about here. Meanwhile, scientists say the human Brian is still evolving. It is unknown if Brian is the one behind the world domination plans from earlier. For this next news story, a 24-year-old man was fined for pretending to be a ghost by making woo noises and waving his arms about in cemetery. Doctors say that putting urine in your ears is not recommended to treat sinus infections. Meanwhile, winter is the only time to go ice fishing. Meanwhile, planes have been forced to land at airports. And in sports, Christians will play atheists in charity volleyball match. The Christians are hoping God will lend them a hand. For this next story, police say a man thought he could only be charged with burglary at night. And in this next shocking story, a meteorite which crashed in Greenland last December may be from space. Meanwhile, a woman falls in a hospital and was told to call an ambulance. She was told by staff on October 8th that no one could help her until an ambulance was called. And finally, as we must save the most serious news story for last, I was bashed with a dildo by man in leather mask, and he killed my dog. May the dog rest in peace. So, I'd like to thank all of my channel members, especially Amethyst Phoenix, Catalin Cormendi, Mike Hawk, Hold Up, and Vicmeister 1999. You can join simply by clicking the join button below. Feel free to like, subscribe, and hit the little notification bell if you enjoyed it, and feel free to comment if you've got something on your mind.